As part of the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, the first in a brand new series now on BBC World News, as Matt Frei explores different aspects of Berlin, a city that thrives on diversity.
On the 26th of June 1963, John F. Kennedy came to Berlin. It was a day that would change the city and its place in history.
All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
After these words were uttered, Berlin became more than just a divided city. It became a symbol, a state of mind. It became everyone's city. And to ordinary Germans like my own parents, the American president suddenly looked like a savior. Kennedy even had a hand in my birth. I came along 5 months later. The shock of his assassination had sent my mother into premature labor. But it wasn't until much later that Berlin would play a defining role in my life. On November the 9th, 1989, as a young BBC radio journalist, I was sent here on assignment. This extraordinary party scene. The smell of champagne. On that side, on the eastern side, a rainbow-colored traffic jam. Everyone sort of walked with a certain urgency. You know, they wanted to get to the other side, just in case this is all just a dream. And this sudden eruption of mundane normality, which had been enjoyed by people living there for decades, and which people over there had only dreamt of, was really quite shocking. My own family was caught up in the mayhem of hope and anxiety as the Berlin Wall fell. I'd always understood what JFK meant when he talked about freedom and oppression, about the division of Germany. But on that day, standing here, I also felt it. On the streets of Berlin have been born the great and terrible ideas of our time. The theory of relativity, communism, and fascism. Theories of sex and sexuality. And the conception of the atomic bomb. The story of Berlin from the city's earliest days is one of a clash of ideas that would define the modern world. In April 1945, the Russian army battled towards the center of the city to defeat Hitler and put an end to the Second World War. Amidst the carnage, a lone figure could be seen making his way through the rubble of Berlin towards the airport. He was a pilot and he was carrying a painting taken out of its frame. His mission was to take that painting safely out of the country. But armed only with a handgun, the mission was doomed to fail. He was shot and fell wounded. But why would a pilot who's just survived the slaughter of the Second World War now risk his life for a painting? Because the painting was both an icon and a key to unlocking the soul of Berlin. It was a copy of this portrait of King Frederick the Great of Prussia, the man who established Berlin as a center for radical thought and to extend his empire in a series of vicious wars. To understand Frederick is to understand Berlin. Frederick, or Fritz as he was known, was born in 1712. He lived and reigned before Germany had become a unified nation, when Berlin was still a fledgling capital of the Kingdom of Prussia. Frederick's upbringing was a baptism of fire, courtesy of a father obsessed with the military. The story goes that young Fritz was woken up every day by a cannon barrage outside his window to get him used to the sound of gunfire. At 16, the young Fritz began to rebel. He got his tutors to teach him classical poetry and the flute against his father's will. He also started to live a double life, outwardly conforming to his father's strict wishes, but secretly amassing a library of forbidden poems and philosophy. Eventually, this difference between father and son was to come to light with tragic consequences. Hans von Katte was a captain in the Prussian army. He developed a close, possibly homosexual relationship with the 18-year-old Fritz. The two friends planned to run away to England while the king was away inspecting his army. But they were betrayed. The king imprisoned his own son and then forced him to watch the beheading of Katte from the window of his cell. It was an act of brutality that would overshadow his life. As a king, Frederick the Great built Sanssouci Palace, a Rococo refuge from the world. Frederick became a great patron of the arts. Himself an accomplished flautist, it was he who gave the concerts. He was a modern man who was molded by the spirit of his times, the spirit of the Enlightenment, and most specifically by the French philosopher Voltaire. Voltaire was a revolutionary thinker. He promoted social reform and equality. He was in love with rationality, and he passionately believed that education would further human betterment. At a time when Europe's monarchs firmly believed in their God-given right to rule over their subjects, Voltaire's ideas were nothing short of explosive. But one monarch who did not see him as a threat was Frederick the Great. The king paid Voltaire a yearly salary, and the writer was an ever-present member of Frederick's group of artists and philosophers. Along with Voltaire, Frederick penned an attack on the despotism of princes and the divine rights of kings. It was an ironic prophecy for Berlin.
Kings have the capacity to do good when they have the will. In the same way, they can also make evil. The lives of the people are sometimes pitiable, and they have very good reason to fear abuse of the sovereign power. Their freedom is at the mercy of his whims. Their very lives are subject to his cruelties. The sovereign, far from being the absolute master of the people which are under his domination, is only the first servant.
But for all his enlightened ideas, many would argue that Frederick wasn't so great. There's another side to his character also reflected in this room. The tools of battle, glorified. However much Frederick rebelled against the military traditions of his family, they were in his blood, and he himself began to hunger for territory. Frederick the Great invaded Saxony, He fought wars with Austria, France, and Russia. He even acquired a sizable chunk of Poland. And yet all the time, his flute music could be heard at night drifting across the military encampments. The warrior philosopher playing his troops to sleep. He was a pretty complex, divided sort of fellow. Perfect for the shrink, you might say. In commemoration of Frederick the Great's successes on the battlefield, an enormous sculpture was commissioned.